What's going on? In this video, I'm going to walk you through the best photo settings for the Canon 5D Classic. I'm going to go through the entire photo settings menu and talk about what each setting does as well as which one I would recommend for you. So I'm not going to waste your time, I'm going to jump right into it, but if this video helps you out in any way, please consider dropping a like and subscribing to my channel. But without further ado, this is the best photo settings for the Canon 5D Mark I. Alright, here we are. Let's go ahead and jump right into the menu. So there's a few different sections to this menu list. This red area here, there's a blue area, and then there's the yellow area. Now the part we're going to be focusing on today is actually just this red section. These are all of the main photo quality settings in this camera that, directly affect the quality coming out of this camera. The rest of these sections are pretty much just personal preference settings that you're going to kind of have to just look at and decide on your own how you want to set it for your specific camera. They don't have to do with the actual image quality specifically, like this red section does right here. So that's what we're going to be going over in this video. Alright, so here we go. The first thing we're going to talk about is this right here, the image quality. So this is pretty much the main thing that has to do with the image quality output of the camera. And there are, as you can see, a bunch of different options you can choose from, but there's 3 different options I'm going to recommend today. So first of all, what these stand for, there's an L, M, and S, and then as you can see, there's kind of like a blocky and then a smooth of each of those different L, M, and S settings. So first off, the L, M, and S stands for large, medium, and small, and that's going to be the resolution of the images. But essentially, let's say a large is, 3000 pixels by 2000 pixels. A medium will actually just shrink the resolution, so it's going to be, let's say 1000 by 500 pixels, and the small is going to be even less than that. So the small, medium, and large has to do with the actual resolution of the photos themselves. But then the 2 different versions of each of those is actually going to be a higher quality and then a lower quality of the same resolution. And then these are all JPEG images. So you can either choose large resolution, high quality, large resolution, lower quality, or medium, high quality, medium, low quality. A bunch of different options you can choose from. And then of course, all those different options with RAW as well. Which, if you don't know, a raw image essentially saves all of the different data from the camera sensor in the image after you take it. So if you want, you can take that image and do an editing software and have a ton of latitude and flexibility for editing your images and changing things like, your exposure, colors, and white balance in an editing software after you take the photo. So out of all these options, the 3 I would recommend are either, first of all, if you don't want to edit any photos, you just want to take pictures with this camera, import them onto your phone or computer and share them, I would recommend choosing this right here. This is JPEG, large resolution, and high quality right there. This is the one I would recommend if you're just going to take pictures and share them and upload them to social media straight out of the camera. This will give you great quality images. But next up, if you do what I do and edit all your photos in something like Adobe Lightroom or editing software, and you just want the highest quality photo out of the camera with the most flexibility for photo editing, I would shoot in RAW right here. This is going to give you the best quality photos straight out of this camera. But RAW photos are a lot more difficult to just upload to social media. You typically want to edit them and then export them as a JPEG and then upload them to social media and email and text and things like that. However, if you want the best of both worlds, these right here are actually RAW plus JPEG in whatever one of the JPEG settings you want to choose, in which I would do the RAW plus large JPEG right here in the good quality. And so what this will do is every single time you take a picture, it'll actually save 2 separate photos to your SD card. One of them will be a raw photo with all of that latitude for editing, and the other one will be the exact same photo but in that large JPEG to where you can just share that photo right away and not have to worry about editing it and exporting it as a JPEG afterwards. But personally, I always just shoot in RAW because all my photos I put it onto Lightroom, edit them, and then I export them to do with what I want to afterwards. So that's what I'm going to set that on right there. Next up we have beep. You can turn this on or off, whatever you choose. I always turn the beeps off. I find they're kind of annoying. It'd be pretty much every time you focus, scroll through menus and hit stuff, it'll essentially just beep. The camera will essentially beep, and I don't know, I personally find that annoying, but that's kind of a personal preference type of choice right there. Next up, shoot without card. So if this is on, it'll allow you to take a photo with no card in the camera, and it'll still show you a preview of the photo on the screen and everything. But since there's no SD card, it won't save that photo, and as soon as you go away from that picture, it'll be gone forever. Now, I actually find this to be a little bit of an issue because sometimes if you're just really quickly going out and taking pictures, you might not realize there's no SD card, and when you take a picture, it still takes a picture, it shows you the preview of it, you might just assume there's an SD card in there. And hopefully you kind of find out eventually, But you might go out and just take a bunch of pictures without even realizing it, and it'll still let you and everything like that, but you might not even have an SD card in there, and then everything would just be gone. So if you set this to off, it's not even gonna let you take a picture. It'll warn you every time that there's no SD card in the camera. It legitimately won't even let you take a picture at all. So I always turn this shoot without card to off, or whatever the setting is to not shoot without a card. I think this is really important to always have, just so it's that extra backup. As soon as you take a picture, you'll know right away, okay, it's not even letting me take a picture, so I need to put an SD card in this camera. All right, next up, auto exposure bracketing. So what this does, essentially wherever you set this at, so let's say I set this right here at -1, 0, and 1. It'll take essentially 3 pictures whenever I take a picture, one that's -1 stop underexposed, one that's 1 stop underexposed, one that is perfectly exposed, and then one that is 1 stop overexposed. So then I can merge those photos in an editing software and kind of make like a DIY HDR photo. If none of that really made sense to you and you don't really understand what that means, then you probably won't need this or be able to use this at all. Then you probably won't need this or use this at all, but it's essentially an auto exposure bracketing where you can set the upper and lower points to, somewhere between 0 and -2 or +2 stops over or underexposed. And it'll just pretty much take 3 pictures in a row in each of those different exposures so you can merge them together. All right, next up, white balance, shift, and bracket. So this will actually shift your white balance towards one of these colors a little bit. If like you notice one of your lights or whatever lighting source you have is a little bit too green, you can shift it down towards magenta or really any other way around. It pretty much just allows you to kind of bracket and shift these white balance colors. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about or if that confuses you, then you don't need to use that. I've personally never used that, so it's probably not something you're going to have to really think about. However, these are something that you probably will. So a custom white balance allows you to take a photo of a white balance card and then set that white balance for the exact lighting. So I don't have any images on here right now, but if you take a full screen photo of a white balance card in the specific lighting that you're in, you can use that and it'll set the exact white balance to whatever it's, is in that photo for your exact lighting. I've never used that personally, but it's pretty nice to have if that is something that you do usually. But then this is something you'll probably use a little bit more often. So this is just the white balance or the color temp. And this you can set to whatever you need to make your lighting look the best in whatever situation you're in. So if you have really warm lighting, turn this down to a lower Kelvin. For daylight lighting, I keep it right around 55 or 5600 Kelvin, which is daylight. And I honestly keep it at that all the time because I shoot in RAW, which means you can change this in your editing software to whatever you want. But essentially the white balance is just going to be the warmth or the coolness of the lights in your photo. So you can mess around with it, you can make it more stylistic or just match it to whatever your exact lighting is to get the most natural, normal looking color in your lighting. But again, I set mine at 5500 Kelvin, which is around daylight, and I just leave it at that. And in my photos, if I'm editing them and want to change it, I can do that either to fix it and make it look natural or even just do it in a stylized way. But either way, next up, color space. There's actually 2 options on here, but just set this at sRGB. It's going to be the color space that is the most universal for, the internet, for social media, for everything like that. Just don't even think about it, set it at sRGB. That's the one you want to use. You don't really want to use Adobe RGB because it can make the colors and stuff kind of look weird in photos in some situations, especially online and on social media. All right, and then lastly, the picture style. The way I kind of think about these is it's kind of like an Instagram filter. So there's different parameters that they shift, like saturation, sharpness, and contrast. That essentially just changes the look of your images slightly. So for example, monochrome is going to be black and white. Neutral is going to be a little bit less saturated, less contrast. You can also create custom ones, but I just set mine on standard. And then again, if I want to adjust the saturation, the sharpness, the colors, anything like that, I'm personally just going to do that in my editing software. But if you only shoot in JPEG, it wouldn't hurt to look through some of these, maybe a landscape or portrait to give you a little bit more saturation, a little bit more contrast. Might make your photos look a little bit better straight out of the camera. Or again, if you want to do black and white, that's going to be monochrome right here to get black and white photos straight out of the camera that look really good. Again, these are kind of something to mess around with on your own. They're pretty much like Instagram filters or something like that. They go over your images. But when it comes to raw photos, these actually don't affect any of that. Since it is just all of the data from the sensor, it's not really going to have any specific changes to the colors and stuff. It's just going to be neutral and you're going to do all that in your editing software. And like I said, the rest of these are pretty much personal preference, auto power off, LCD brightness, the time and date, things like that. So that is it for the best photo quality settings for the 5D Classic. Please consider dropping a like and subscribing, and let me know in the comments if this helped you out, and I will see you in the next video.